Well, last Wednesday, the priests in Auckland had an annual day, which we have now at the Waipuna Hotel over there near Mount Wellington direction. And normally they get an overseas speaker for it. It runs through from 10 o'clock in the morning or 10:30, and it goes through till about 5, and then they have dinner for those who wish at 6. But anyway, this year we had a man from England called David Wells. Don't know if any of you ever heard of him, but he has been involved a lot. He's about 55-year-old, he said. He has been involved mainly in education, and particularly religious education. He has been associated, for example, with the cafe program. I don't know if you have heard of that one. Anyway, his theme this year was on mummies in a museum or missionaries on the move. Mummies in a museum or missionaries on the move. And you may be aware that that's closely related to what Pope Francis has been teaching us, particularly in the document Evangelii Gaudium, the joy of the gospel. So that's why he's looking at it. You know, we priests, he was talking to priests, of course. Are we sort of just mummies inside, or are we actually missionaries on the move outside? But coming to that document which Pope Francis wrote, Evangelii Gaudium, the joy of the gospel, he lists a lot of things that can be obstacles to being missionaries in that sense, being fruitful proclaimers of the gospel, or evangelizers, if you like. And he notes that particularly the challenges given to us by today's world, but also the many temptations that can come from within us. So they're from the outside and from the inside, as it were, things that prevent us being active evangelizers. From inside, for example, you might have selfishness or laziness maybe, or pessimism, that's often there, or worldliness, or many other factors. So these are things that he spoke about. Now, David Wells gave attention in particular to 3 children, as he called them, of the postmodern age, the age in which we are now. They were insecurity, idolatry, and individualism. And just a little word about them. In regard to insecurity, a feeling of insecurity, he spoke of it as a kind of a cynical distrust of authority. And you find it in both the civil authority, in regard to the civil authority, and in regard to the church authority. For example, people who ask themselves, and interestingly on the Friday's paper, the front page, I don't know if you notice it, it was about the election, but it says, who can we trust? Did you notice that? So that was 2 days after he had spoken. Because there's a distrust of politicians, there's a distrust in many people of church authorities, there's a distrust of media and other things as well. So that kind of a cynical almost distrust of anything that tries to teach us or is teaching us. Idolatry in the sense that people are more and more turned into consumers, brainwashed really by advertisements, TV shows, and in other ways. And in that regard, for example, he brought to our attention that there are now perfumes or scents, which are called faith, hope, love, real love, eternity. Don't know if you've got any of them. But there are. Faith, hope, love, joy as well. Real love, eternity. So, it shows that within us, it's recognized that there is a desire for these virtues, because when God created us, He put in us a tendency towards Himself. He put in us a kind of an urge there to seek Him. We're created for God. And they're aware of that. And so they use these things in order to promote their own profits. That's happening. And then individualism. Pope Francis refers to that in number 78 of The Joy of the Gospel, and this is what he says. Today we are seeing in many pastoral workers, including consecrated men and women, an inordinate desire for their personal freedom and relaxation, which leads them to see their work as a mere appendage to their life, as if it were not part of their very identity. At the same time, the spiritual life comes to be identified with a few religious exercises which can offer a certain comfort, but which do not encourage encounter with others, or with engagement in the world, or a passion for evangelization. As a result, one can observe in many agents of evangelization, even though they pray, a heightened individualism, a crisis of identity, and a cooling of fervor. These are three evils which fuel one another. That's Pope Francis. Now, Pope Francis speaks of the difficulties and the obstacles facing evangelization, but that's only part of his message. His full message is really a very positive one, because despite that being the situation in which we are, we can do something about it. We have in all of us, he says, in virtue of our baptism, become missionary disciples, in virtue of our baptism. Every Christian is challenged here and now to be actively engaged in evangelization. And the thing is, if we have experienced ourselves God's mercy and God's love, then evangelizing others involves communicating that experience in some way to other people. That's evangelizing. Communicating the joy that we have in the experience that we have of God's mercy and God's love. The joy of the gospel. Pope Francis recalls the words of Andrew the apostle to his brother Peter, "We have found the Messiah." What a wondrous thing that was, and they were overjoyed by it. We have found the Messiah. Remember that the Messiah had been promised for centuries in the people. And now, these are the ones, these very men themselves are the ones who have met him when he came. So that was a source of great joy for them, meeting Christ and coming to know him. We have found the Messiah. So the same joy is to be the mark of our Catholic faith and practice, and of our communication to others of our experience of God's love and mercy then. We have, as we know, been given a treasure. We know the parables in the Gospel, the treasure found in the field, or the pearl of great price. We have been given a treasure, but the treasure for us is not just for ourselves, it has to be shared. And in number 168 of The Joy of the Gospel, Pope Francis says, rather than experts in dire predictions, dour judges bent on rooting out every threat and deviation, we should appear as joyful messengers of challenging proposals, guardians of the goodness and beauty which shine forth in a life of fidelity to the gospel. You know, he uses the word sourpuss, and most unusual in a papal document. But at least he didn't use English, of course, in the document, but that's the way it's translated, sourpusses. And it's very obvious, like he's talking about people who don't proclaim the gospel in a joyful way, but rather in a very dour way, and only finding things wrong and not seeing things right as the right things as well. So that's his call to us. Now, you might ask, why have I spoken about all this today? Well, your secular Franciscan way of life is expressed in Article 6 of the Rule, and this is what it says. They have been made living members of the Church by being buried and raised with Christ in baptism. They have been united more intimately with the Church by profession, and therefore they should go forth as witnesses and instruments of her mission among all people, proclaiming Christ by their life and words. So being missionary disciples, evangelizing joyfully by life and words, that's an integral part of being a secular Franciscan. Holy Spirit.